Hello, I'm Clint Walker, and this is Real Estate Appraiser Secrets. And today we're going to answer the question, should a cash buyer get an appraisal for their purchase? Now, cash buyers are an interesting topic to me because in the appraiser world, we sort of assume, I think a general attitude sort of assumes that cash buyers are more discerning about the property they're purchasing because, emotionally, they are going to go to closing table and write a big check straight out of their bank account to purchase this property. And so I think the common assumption is that, they want to hold on to some of that money. And as opposed to, a lot of maybe the more common buyer who's getting 80% financing or even 96.5% financing or 99% financing. We're going to the closing table means writing a check for 1% of that purchase price. Now, these buyers are often a little less worried about the price tag and a little more worried about their monthly payment. Flip that to the cash buyer, they've got no monthly payment. They're really only worried about that huge sum of money that's coming out of their bank account. That's the general attitude. That's the general assumption that a lot of the appraiser community makes about this buyer. In my experience, though, a lot of these cash buyers come to the table using a pool of money that is unearned. And I don't mean that in any sort of derogatory sense. I mean it as it's coming from either equity from their previous house or maybe an inheritance or some other source that maybe it's coming from real estate, earmarked for real estate. They never really even thought about this pool of money. And when I say it's unearned, I'm just saying using that word to sort of draw the distinction between the person who maybe saved for 20 years out of their paycheck to one day buy a house for cash. Those people exist. And I think those are the people who really sort of fit in better with that assumption that the cash buyer is a more discerning buyer. If you come to the table with a pile of cash that came from your previous house that's already in your mind going towards the next house, you may not be so worried about or emotionally attached to that money. And in my experience, I think I see that more often than not, especially here where so many of our buyers are coming from higher priced markets and, maybe making a lateral move in that market. They wouldn't have had so much extra equity to not really worry about, but coming here, they can have lots of extra cash for a purchase. So they approach the transaction with a different mentality. And I think that's interesting, especially if you compare it to the lending side of this, where, you're dealing with banks that have hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that they're lending out. And they never approach a transaction with any sort of complacency. In every single lender transaction, the buyer is forced to get an appraisal and pay for that appraisal for the lender. And in those situations where the buyer might get a waiver or, a human appraiser is not involved, the lender is still doing some sort of due diligence. They're still incurring an expense in every single transaction to check the value of their collateral that they're getting involved with. It's never a foregone conclusion. There's never any complacency involved in the lending side, even though they've got tons of cash and it is earmarked specifically for this purchase. So I think those two ideas, those two approaches are just sort of an interesting comparison. But on the subject of a buyer, should a buyer get an appraisal for their cash purchase? Yes, absolutely, every single time. Lately, this year, we've had several calls from agents that have dealt with cash buyers who are reselling their property, and I think on several of these they just recently purchased the house. One of them within a couple years, one of them within like 6 months. And the 6-month one was especially interesting because the buyer, I mean, it was a 7-figure price tag, expensive house. And they moved in, and I talked to the buyer about this directly, and they just sort of quickly came to the conclusion that this house was not for them, and they wanted to resell it. But they didn't get an appraisal on their purchase. So this buyer was telling me, they just sort of said, well, I've got an agent and the seller's got an agent, and so all these agents have looked at this price and they sort of implicitly signed off on it as being an okay price. And I liked the house when we first walked through it. We were moving from out of state. There's lots of personal motives for anybody making a move, and some of these personal motives start to make the price irrelevant to people. So for all these reasons, this person didn't pay for an appraisal on their 7-figure price tag property they're purchasing. And so he moves in, doesn't like it, wants to resell it after 6 months. And so now they want to get an appraisal on their list price, because now they're sort of like in tune to what's going on in the market, which has not been great in a little while. And he wants to find out what the house is worth now with the new market conditions. But what we discovered on the pre-listing appraisal was that the house was not as big as they thought it was when they bought it. And folks, I don't agree with pricing things on price per square foot, but practically every agent does it. And so when you are using price per square foot as your metric to price a house, your square foot has got to be right, okay? That's half of the price per square foot. Your square foot's got to be right. So, one of the things that this buyer did not get by skipping the appraisal when he was making his cash purchase was not only did he not get the benefit of an objective party looking at this and giving him their expert opinion on it, but he also lost out on the appraiser measuring the house and seeing that it wasn't as big as what was being advertised. And that ultimately was the kicker on this one. So, the market itself, even though we've had some turbulence and some people have been losing a little bit of money in this market, it's not always the case in every market. But when a house is significantly smaller than what you thought, and you paid a price that was either maybe a little overpriced or pinging the top of what it possibly could have been, and then you try to sell it again in 6 months, you're not in for a good time. And we had to sort of give this buyer the bad news, and he was very gracious about it. But I want that to be sort of a warning tale for all of you that help your cash buyers understand that, and understand for yourself that an appraisal is not just some grouchy person coming in to give you their opinion on the price. There is a lot of factual analysis they're going to give you about the property from their own investigation. And a lot of that stuff is more valuable than their price opinion. I'm working on a pre-listing appraisal right now where I know the agent is just calling to get an idea of what they should list it for. But as I dig into this property, what I'm actually giving them in just the factual analysis is far more valuable. It is, it's like this property has some acreage and they want to sell off some of it. Well, the owner and the agent, they've got some ideas about this, but on the appraisal side, with what we know and what we learned to look into on your, in your plat or whatever, your legal description and deeds, I'm seeing problems, and I'm advising her of these problems on the front end so she can set the expectations with her buyer. So she's really getting like, I don't know. I just see that as way more valuable than whatever I'm going to say the price should be on the property, because to me, and this is what I see in my own business, my skill set as an appraiser that allows me to advise my clients is always more valuable to them, or as valuable to them as my ability to price their properties. A lot of times I'll give them my suggestion to price their property, and they're going to tell me what they want, and I'm going to do that anyway. And so really the value I've given them is to say, hey, here's what I see as an appraiser. Here's what I think we're going to deal with the next appraisal. Or in addition to that, here's what's going on with your property and what we need to know about. Here's some of the hurdles we need to clear. Here's repairs we need to make. Whatever else can go on with the property. The appraisal, the scope of an appraisal, when you have the appraiser come out, especially for pre-listing purposes, is going to cover practically all of that. And to me, that's worth everything you're going to pay for it. You could throw away the opinion of value after that if you know how to guide your clients through it. That's how you demonstrate value and get a repeat customer, a repeat client. I've been a realtor long enough. I know not to call these people customers. A repeat client. So, if you've been in my class, you've heard me sort of preach on this stuff. But that is also the benefit to a cash buyer of getting these things. And again, you tell your cash buyer, look, I know it's going to be, I know appraisal seems expensive, and I know, but you're getting way more than just the opinion of value. And hey, that opinion of value from the appraiser might be less than what you're paying for it, but here's the other information that they're providing to you as part of that fee, and here's the other information that they're giving you that's going to help you down the road potentially. So I hope that's helpful. And if we can ever be of service to you on anything like that, you can find us at appraiserpool.com. Pre-listing appraisals, cash buyer appraisals, estate sales, divorce appraisals, whatever you need. If it's residential, we can help you with that, or professional measurements or consultations. So feel free to reach out. I appreciate you watching the video as always, and I'll see you next time.